I had no idea that day would stay with me forever. It started like any other, just me, a warm cup of coffee, and the quiet hum of a small cafe tucked away on a busy street. I came in to escape the noise of the world for a few minutes, to sit down and breathe. The air smelled like fresh bread and cinnamon, and soft music played in the background. It felt safe, calm, but then something shifted. At first, it was almost invisible, just a quick glance, a change in the way people stopped chatting, the way the baristas exchanged nervous looks. And then I heard it. A sharp voice cutting through the quiet like a knife. Someone was angry, not just angry, harsh, impatient, and loud enough that heads turned. I looked over and saw a man standing near the counter. His voice was raised, almost shouting. His face was tight with frustration. The room seemed to shrink around him. People's smiles faded, conversations stopped, and the warmth drained out like the air had suddenly gone cold. My heart tightened. I didn't know who the man was yelling at, or what had set him off, but I could feel something wrong, something heavy settling in. It was a moment that made everyone hold their breath. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. I was stuck, watching as the quiet tension grew. Little did I know, what was about to happen would change how I saw kindness and courage forever. Behind the counter stood Ethan. He was easy to spot, not because he shouted or rushed, but because of the way he carried himself, calm, steady, and kind. Ethan was probably in his early 20s. He wasn't like most employees I'd seen at cafes before. He moved a little slower, taking extra time with each order, making sure he got everything right. Ethan has a mild physical disability that made some of his movements a bit different. Sometimes his hands would shake slightly when he poured coffee or reached for a cup. And when he spoke, there was a small delay, a gentle pause before the words came out. But his voice, soft and clear, was always warm. What stood out most was the smile on his face. No matter how busy the cafe got or how complicated an order was, Ethan smiled. He greeted every customer with patience and respect, never letting frustration show. He seemed genuinely happy to be there, doing his best. It was easy to see how much the regular customers loved him. I heard people praise him quietly, words like sweet, dedicated, and the heart of this place. Some would even come back just to say hello. The manager once told me Ethan was one of the kindest people she'd ever met and how proud she was to have him on the team. But today was different. That morning, as the cafe filled with the usual crowd, Ethan was doing his best to keep up. He repeated orders carefully when he wasn't sure, asked customers to wait just a moment while he checked something, and never once lost his calm. But then the door slammed open. The rude customer had arrived. His eyes scanned the room like he owned it. When he reached the counter, his gaze locked onto Ethan, not with kindness, but something sharper, colder. He didn't seem to notice Ethan's disability at first. But as Ethan spoke slowly, explaining the menu and confirming the order, the man's patience ran out quickly. He snapped his fingers, interrupted Ethan, and made a loud comment about how slow and incompetent the young man was. His voice carried across the cafe, harsh and unfair. I saw Ethan's smile falter for a second, but then he straightened his shoulders and tried again, softer this time. Some customers shifted uncomfortably, but no one said a word. That rude customer was clearly not just upset about his coffee order. His words and tone made it clear. He was judging Ethan, not just for being slow, but for being different. And in that moment, I realized the day was about to get a lot harder for Ethan. The door to the cafe slammed open, and suddenly the peaceful morning was shattered. A sharply dressed man stormed inside, his expensive shoes clicking loudly on the wooden floor. He didn't even look around. He was already irritated, barking into his phone as if the whole world owed him something. His voice was sharp, impatient, full of frustration. He barely glanced at the other customers or the cozy atmosphere. I could tell right away, this wasn't going to be a calm visit. He ended the call with a quick, angry whatever, then turned toward the counter, his eyes locking onto Ethan. The young man was finishing up with another customer, but the man didn't wait. He snapped his fingers loudly, cutting through the cafe's quiet like a harsh whistle. "Hey," he barked. "Are you going to take my order or not? I don't have all day." Ethan looked up, a little startled, but he smiled politely. He asked the man to repeat his order, just to make sure he understood correctly. That's when things started to unravel. The man's face twisted in irritation. Why do you keep asking me to repeat myself? Can't you hear? Are you even listening? His voice grew louder, drawing the attention of everyone nearby. Ethan's hands trembled slightly as he repeated the order back, slow and clear. But the man wasn't satisfied. No, no, that's wrong. What's wrong with you? This is simple stuff, he snapped. Then, without warning, he made a cruel joke about Ethan's speech. What is that? You sound like you're stuck in slow motion or something. I felt my stomach twist. Ethan's smile faltered again, but he didn't respond. He tried to stay calm, to do his job the best he could. The man wasn't done. He began calling Ethan names: incompetent, useless, slowpoke. His words were cruel, louder now, echoing in the small cafe like an unwanted storm. Where's your manager? I want to speak to someone who can actually do their job, he demanded, slamming his hand on the counter. The cafe fell into an uncomfortable silence. Everyone was watching, but no one spoke up. I felt frozen too, unsure if I should say something or just let it play out. Ethan was clearly hurt, but still polite, still trying to do his best despite the man's cruelty. The rude customer didn't care about Ethan's disability or his effort. All he saw was someone who wasn't meeting his impossible standards, and he made sure to let everyone know how little he thought of the young man. In that moment, I realized how fragile kindness could be, and how easily people could turn to cruelty when they didn't understand. But even in the silence, something was about to change. As the man's voice grew louder, the cafe seemed to hold its breath. The usual buzz of conversations, the clinking of cups, even the soft music, all faded away. It was as if time slowed down, and all anyone could hear was the harsh words cutting through the room. Ethan's hands began to tremble noticeably. I saw him gripping the edge of the counter, trying to steady himself. His smile disappeared completely now, replaced by a look of deep sadness. He kept apologizing, his voice barely above a whisper but full of sincerity. I'm sorry, I'm really sorry. I'll fix it. But the man didn't want to hear it. He shouted back, each word sharper than the last, demanding more, pushing harder. The tension in the room thickened, pressing down on everyone like a heavy weight. Behind the counter, the manager was nowhere to be seen. She was in the back, probably unaware of the storm unfolding at the front. I wished someone would step in, someone who could stop this cruelty before it got worse. I looked around, people were watching, but no one moved. No one spoke. I felt frozen too, torn between wanting to stand up for Ethan and the fear of making things worse. My heart raced. Should I say something? Should I try to help? Or was it better to stay quiet and let it pass? I could feel Ethan's pain, his courage to keep going despite everything, and I wanted so badly to protect him. But in that moment, I was just one person, silent, watching, hoping for a miracle. And then, from the corner of the room, I saw him. A quiet man who had been sitting alone, watching all along. He was about to change everything. In the corner of the cafe, there was a man sitting alone. He hadn't said a word since he walked in. Dressed simply, he wore a plain baseball cap, pulled low over his forehead, and dark sunglasses that hid his eyes. He looked like someone who just wanted to enjoy a quiet moment, nothing more. But now, as the rude customer continued to shout and belittle Ethan, something changed in the quiet man. Slowly, deliberately, he stood up from his chair. There was no rush or anger in his movements. Instead, he carried himself with a calm confidence that made you notice him even if you weren't sure why. The cafe was still tense, everyone's eyes flicking between the angry man at the counter and the trembling young employee. But then, all attention shifted to this quiet stranger as he began to walk forward. He moved steadily, not trying to draw attention, yet somehow commanding it. The clatter of cups and murmurs of the crowd seemed to fade into the background. Even the rude customer paused for a brief second, confused by this unexpected presence. The man's steps were slow but sure, like he was walking into a place he belonged, though no one had invited him. I could feel the energy in the room shift. This wasn't someone who wanted to fight fire with fire. There was something different about him, something quiet but powerful. Still, no one in the cafe had any idea who this man was. He looked ordinary enough, a stranger in a baseball cap and sunglasses, but there was an unmistakable aura around him. Like someone who had seen the worst in the world and decided he wouldn't stand for it anymore. As he approached the counter, the rude customer opened his mouth to speak again, probably to tell this man to mind his own business. But the stranger didn't flinch. He simply raised his head just enough to reveal a small part of his face. And in that moment, the whole cafe went silent again. The quiet man stopped just a few steps from the counter. His voice, when he finally spoke, was calm and steady, a sharp contrast to the rude customer's loud shouting. "Sir, please stop," he said gently but firmly. The rude customer turned, sneering, clearly annoyed. "And who do you think you are, telling me what to do?" he snapped, folding his arms like he was ready for a fight. The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he slowly reached up and removed his sunglasses. Then, with a quiet movement, he lifted his baseball cap just enough to reveal his face. For a moment, no one spoke. Then, from the tables nearby, a few soft gasps escaped. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. I knew that face. It was someone famous, someone unforgettable. Someone who had appeared on countless screens, whose face was familiar to millions around the world. It was Johnny Depp. Johnny Depp stood there in the small cafe, calm and kind, looking directly at the rude customer. There was no anger in his eyes, no desire to start a fight. But there was a strength that couldn't be ignored, a quiet power that filled the room. The rude customer's sneer faltered. For the first time, he looked unsure. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Johnny stepped a little closer and spoke again, his voice low but clear. "People like Ethan don't deserve your cruelty, they deserve respect, they deserve kindness." The man's face went pale. Suddenly, his loud voice was gone, replaced by stammering apologies. He looked around, embarrassed, realizing that everyone was watching. Johnny didn't wait for a response. He turned back to Ethan with a warm smile, as if saying, "I've got this." The cafe was stunned, no one moved. It was a moment that felt like it stretched forever, and in that silence, something changed. Yes, it really was Johnny Depp. The quiet man who had just stood up for Ethan was none other than the famous actor. But here, in this small cafe, he wasn't acting or performing. He was just a man, quietly standing up for what was right. Johnny looked directly at the rude customer, his voice calm but firm. "People like Ethan," he said, "people who face challenges every day, deserve kindness and respect, not cruelty." The cafe remained silent, hanging on his every word. Then Johnny shared something personal. He spoke softly about someone close to him, a family member who had a disability and had faced judgment and misunderstanding all their life. He told how important it was to be patient and compassionate because everyone has struggles that aren't always visible. His words carried weight. They weren't just for the rude customer, they were a reminder for all of us. The man who had been so loud and harsh suddenly looked very small. His face went pale. He stumbled over his words, trying to apologize. It was clear he wasn't used to being confronted like this. Without another word, he turned and left the cafe quickly, leaving behind a heavy silence. Ethan stood quietly, still unsure what had just happened. But for the rest of us watching, it was clear something important had shifted. Johnny's presence wasn't about fame or attention, it was about standing up for kindness when it mattered most. The cafe stayed quiet for a long moment after the rude customer left. Everyone was still trying to process what had just happened. I could see it on their faces, shock, relief, maybe even a little awe. Ethan, though, looked confused. He didn't fully understand why a famous man had stepped in for him, or why the angry customer had left so suddenly. But he was still the same gentle, kind young man I'd noticed earlier. Johnny turned to Ethan with a warm smile. "You did great," he said softly. "You handled that with more patience and courage than most people would have." Ethan's eyes lit up a little, and for the first time all morning, his smile returned fully. Johnny reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He asked Ethan if he could take a photo together, not for fame or attention, but just a small moment to remember. Ethan nodded shyly, and they posed for a quick picture. Then, without making a scene, Johnny slipped out of the cafe quietly, as if he had never been there at all. The manager finally came out from the back, looking puzzled. She glanced around, noticing the quiet energy in the room. "What happened?" she asked. Her voice low. I smiled softly, knowing there were things she might never fully understand, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that kindness had won today. The cafe slowly returned to life. People started talking again, but now with a new feeling, a sense of respect and care that hadn't been there before. Watching Ethan, I felt hopeful. In a world that can be harsh and unfair, there are moments of light. Moments when strangers become heroes, and small acts of kindness change everything, and sometimes those heroes don't shout or fight. They simply stand quietly and do what's right. As I sat back down with my coffee, my mind was swirling with everything I had just witnessed. It's so easy to stay quiet, to look away when someone is being treated badly. It's tempting to pretend it's not our problem. Sometimes, I think we do it without even realizing. But today showed me something important. Kindness doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't have to come with a big show or a crowd watching. Sometimes, the most powerful bravery is quiet and gentle, like Johnny's. He didn't shout or demand attention, he just stood up calmly and said what needed to be said. He reminded us all that respect and compassion aren't things we should have to fight for, they should be given freely. I couldn't help but wonder how many celebrities would do the same if no cameras were around. How many people would stand up for someone like Ethan, just because it's the right thing to do? Johnny didn't ask for thanks or praise. He didn't want to be a hero, he just did what he believed was right, and that changed everything in that small cafe. As I finished my coffee and got ready to leave, I felt different. Something inside me had shifted. I realized that standing up for kindness, whether loudly or quietly, can make a world of difference, and maybe, just maybe, we all have the power to be that quiet courage for someone else. What would you have done if you were there? Would you have stayed silent, or found the courage to speak up against unfairness? Sometimes standing up for kindness isn't easy, but it's always important. If this story moved you, please like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more stories that remind us to be kind and brave. Don't forget to share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Thank you so much for watching. Your kindness can make a difference.